Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this latest interview here on our YouTube channel. I'm really excited today to introduce you to a friend of mine, Bill Hepsher from the Canadian Med Store. Now, if you've been following us, especially participating in our Facebook group, which is a free private group for Medicare beneficiaries called Medicare Q&A with Boomer Benefits, you probably have seen all the questions this year about brand name drugs and how some of the Part D formularies are either not carrying them or they're gotten really expensive, or they have prior authorizations or quantity limits that may be an issue. And so I have always been looking for how we might be able to have solutions for this for people. But if you have not done your research on this, there are a lot of pharmacy websites out there that are actually scams where you may go and put your information in thinking you're ordering a medication and you may be sending that information to who knows where, and then you risk identity theft. So I was super excited to connect with Bill this year because he is also a member of the National Association of Benefits and Insurance Professionals. You all know that I advocate in Washington, D.C. every year on Medicare, and Bill runs an operation here in the States. So the Canadian Med Store is actually located here in the U.S., which is so cool. So Bill, welcome. Share with us a little bit about how you got started in the industry and how is it that the Canadian Med Store is actually here in the States?
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. I know we've been talking about doing this for a while, and what better time than right in the middle of enrollment time for Medicare Part D with all the changes going on. So, you know what? It's always a fun story for me to tell, only because I don't come from an insurance background, like a lot of the agents that you work with do. I don't come from a pharmacy background. I got involved and started my company called the Canadian Med Store 21 years ago. I can't believe it's already been 21 years.
Yeah.
But I got involved because of a personal situation. My brother was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma when he was 27 years old, went through a bone marrow transplant and needed an anti-rejection medication that even 20 something years ago was costing us tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
We were hearing stories about people that lived in Maine and Michigan and Vermont that could drive over to Canada, 10 minutes away to a pharmacy, fill their prescription for 80% less than what they were paying here in the US. And, a half an hour later be sitting on their couch watching Jeopardy again. So we looked into that. And what we found is that we could source my brother's medication, the exact same drug manufactured by the exact same manufacturer, one just labeled for sale in Canada through a licensed Canadian pharmacy, and another one here in the US. And the Canadian product was literally 80% less expensive than what we were getting in the United States. So my brother's medications, that was tens of thousands of dollars, was now costing him just a few $100s a month. Still a lot of money, but a whole heck of a lot less expensive than what he was going to pay here. I came back to Tampa, Florida, where I live. I spoke to a physician friend of mine, and he told me, Bill, I write prescriptions every single day, but a lot of my patients, especially my senior patients, remember 21 years ago, there was no such thing as Medicare Part D.
Yeah,
So we've
that's
been
right.
through the wars before, and we've seen the changes before. But he said to me, Bill, I write prescriptions and I have patients who either cut their pills in half, they use their inhaler every other day. We hear the same stories that are happening right now. So I said, well, if my brother could do it, why can't we help these seniors? And we opened our very first location in Zephyr Hills, Florida. And I can tell you that 21 years ago, the average senior was not walking around with a smartphone in their hand.
Yeah.
They weren't used to just going online and ordering medications from some pharmacy from God knows where. So they came into our offices, and what we did is we helped them do exactly what people that live 10 minutes from the northern border could do, but we had the medications mailed from our pharmacies in Canada to them here in Florida. And we expanded to where we now operate 6 locations in the state of Florida. And I'm happy to say that we have over 100,000 clients that live in all 50 states now. So even if they don't walk
Fabulous.
into our offices in Florida, they're still going to be speaking to one of our staff members that are located right here in the United States. So.
Awesome. That's such a great startup story. And I didn't realize that you and we started around the same time. So Boomer Benefits was founded back in May of 2005. And you're right. I remember in the very beginning, before a year later, when Part D rolled out, there were people spending $10,000 a year on medications. And you would read about people, especially with insulins, risking their lives trying to space these life-saving medications out. So this problem in the US with the cost of drugs and access to drugs for seniors especially has been an ongoing problem.
Yeah. And let me tell you just two more things about that. When I started the business 21 years ago, I honestly didn't think we would be here 21 years later. I certainly didn't think that we would expand and grow a business to 6 offices and 100,000 clients.
Yeah.
We thought that something was going to be done with the cost of prescription drugs in the United States. We thought that changes would be made and that drugs would become a lot more affordable. But in actuality, you see that 20-year time period, whether it was the creation of Medicare Part D, whether it was the Affordable Care Act, both of those helped a lot of people in a lot of different ways. But one thing none of the legislation has done, and I would argue that some of the most recent legislation through the IRA is not really doing anything to attack the actual cost of care or the actual cost
Yeah.
of prescriptions, which is why we here in the United States are paying literally 3, 4, 5 times for a medication that someone in Canada or England or Australia is paying, and
Mhm.
that's the crazy part. Is 21 years later, we're still in business. So,
Yeah, that's just awesome. I love that story. And
mm,
it's heartwarming to know that you can start a business like that and end up helping that many people.
mhm.
It would be interesting to see the total dollar amount that must be out there somewhere from all those collective clients and what they've saved over the years.
Yeah, when we get a few extra minutes, I'll try to throw that together. But I
Yeah, we'll
say I
be
need to do it, but honestly, right now we're just right in the middle of trying to help as many people as we can. That I haven't been able to do the math, but maybe over Christmas break
That's
I'll
right.
get
And it's
to
not
work
going to
on
be before December 7th, folks. So we
it.
can at least
That's right.
guarantee you
That's
that.
right. Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about in relation to that is because I can remember when Part D came out, people were like, "Oh, the end all answer. This is going to solve all the problems. We'll be able to get all of our medications now." And then Part D has evolved in many ways, but with the Inflation Reduction Act, obviously happy about a $2,000 cap for people, but there were some unintended consequences there, which are potentially the premiums for Part D were going to go up quite a bit, even before the subsidy was created by CMS to stabilize some of those premiums. Although we have a couple of carriers out there with low cost drug plans, there's also some that have taken significant hikes. And then, of course, one of the things that I had mentioned to you before that I keep seeing over and over again in the Facebook group is, well, I love my drug plan and it works great for these drugs, but I have this drug and it isn't covered. So now what do I do? And so I thought this would be a good opportunity for you and I to talk about a few different types of clients where having this relationship with Canadian MedStore might really be helpful. So let's talk first about that Part D person, somebody that maybe takes 6 or 7 generics, or maybe take 4 generics, but they've got 1 or 2 brand name medications, and maybe their Part D plan doesn't cover that medication at all. Or more importantly, I think what's really worrying me is that the brand name drug might be on the formulary, but now it's got a step therapy limit, or and there's no guarantee that a drug exception would mean that that carrier would actually cover that. So talk to me about how people in that situation can benefit from your business.
Yeah, that's actually largely what we're seeing in the first few weeks of the enrollment period now is people are coming to us, whether they're agents helping their clients or they're directly from the clients, and also from primary care doctors and specialists. We're seeing a lot of them reaching out to us and saying, I've got this person on this medication. Their plan used to cover the drug and it's not this year. Or what's happening more often is they're saying it's covered, but it's covered at a much higher tier. So, for
Yes.
example, if you take a drug like Eliquis, which is one of the most popular medications that we order through our international pharmacy network. You take a drug like Eliquis that maybe last year used to be a $50 copayment. What's happening now is because it's getting shifted over to those higher tiers, someone's still paying the premium, but now they maybe are paying a 25% share of cost. So if you take a drug like Eliquis, which is a $600 a month drug here in the United States, 25% of that is $150. So what's happening is the individual now, when they used to pay, $40 for a copayment, are now paying $150. The problem is the $2,000 max out of pocket is great for somebody who's taking a lot of expensive drugs.
Mhm.
But if you're that person like we typically work with that's only taking 1 or 2 expensive drugs, you're going to pay that 150 for the whole year and you're
Yeah.
never even going to hit your $2,000 maximum out of pocket. So what a lot of folks are saying is I don't have to buy up to the really expensive drug plan because I'm still probably going to have to pay a high copayment anyway and a very expensive premium. I can stay on my inexpensive plan and I can still buy my medication from Canada. For example, the
Yeah.
Eliquis is available for $50 to our international program. So now somebody can enroll in an inexpensive Part D plan, get all their generic drugs probably covered for free, and instead of having to pay $1,500 or $1,800 for their Eliquis, they can order it from Canada for $50 a month. And what most people are telling us is that they're able to get a year's worth of medication from the international locations now for about what it was going to cost them just to meet their deductible on their Part D plan.
Yeah.
So that's one
$590
of
now.
these things that we're seeing a lot of people really benefit. And again, people, if I want to be very, very cautious to make sure people understand this, if you're taking a lot of prescription, brand name prescription medication, you probably don't want to order your drug from Canada because
Yes.
you're going to get to that $2,000 maximum out of pocket pretty darn quick. And then the plan's going to pay the majority of the costs. But if you're the typical person who's maybe taking 5 drugs, 4 of them are generic, and one drug is an Eliquis or a Januvia or a Janumate
Yeah.
or an Advair inhaler, you're not going to really probably benefit from that 2,000. You're going to end up spending more money out of your own pocket than you did the last few years.
Yes, exactly. And I don't think I told you this, but my dad is in exactly this situation. So he takes a whole bunch of generic drugs and then one brand name drug. And so when we were looking for him and I ran the analysis, of course, the most expensive drug plan was the one that came up at the top, but he was only going to need it for that one medication. And I said, we have a solution for this now. We can send you to Canadian Med Store. We'll be able to source that there. This is good for my dad, right? Because he's one of these people that was never sick a day in his life until now. And so he always wants to take a supplement or a cinnamon pill. And his
Right.
doctors have had to say, no, really, these are some important medications that we need you on. We finally got him on board with taking some of those. But, he doesn't want to spend $1,200 a year on his drug plan
Right.
for just this one medication. So he's actually like the perfect client in that example. We also
Right.
talked
So
about
one thing, let me just comment on that for just a second,
sure.
because I can give you an example not only about my own dad, similar to that, but what I would tell people to do is if you're watching the video and you're running an illustration, through software, if you're working with an agent, hopefully, one way to do that is to say, hey, what if I'm taking these 5 drugs? Let's run it with all 5 drugs, but let's also run it with my 4 generic
Yes.
drugs, and let's pull the Eliquis out or the Januvia out, because I know I can get that medication from the Canadian Med Store for $50 a month. And when they run that illustration both different ways, I think what they'll find is a lot of times they don't have to buy that $100 a month premium and still pay a deductible and still pay a high cost on that brand name drug. They know that it's available for $50 through the Canadian Med Store. Now, I would bet you that they can probably find a plan for very, very inexpensive that'll probably cover their generic drugs for free. My father has a very similar story. He takes a medication for his diabetes. He's been on it for about 3 or 4 years. Unlike your dad, he's been on it for a while. We got him approved we got his drug plan. We had to go through what was called step therapy, which basically means it's covered under the drug plan, but they have to get special permission, meaning you have to try all these other inexpensive drugs before we'll cover it for you. My father went through that whole process 3 or 4 years ago. Last year decided that there was a plan that was going to fit him better. So he switched plans. Well, the plan came back and said, okay, we need you to go through step therapy. Remember, this is a different carrier now. And he said, no, we've already gone through step therapy 3 years ago. And they said, well, that was a different company. Now we want you to go through it again. And I finally said, Dad, you know what I do for a living, right? Like I can get you that medication for about what your copayment was going to be. So it took me 4 years, but I finally won my father over as a client. But there was an example of another reason why the insurance company was having him go through that step therapy process, which you and I both know that that's often a way to keep the costs down. Maybe there's a generic drug that an individual can take that won't cost them any copayment, and they'll do just as good of a job as the brand name. In my father's situation, and probably in your dad's situation, that newer brand name medication is really what they need to take. But it's a waste for somebody to say, wait a minute, do I really want to jump through the hoops of step therapy? Maybe until I get approved through step therapy, I can order this medication from the Canadian Med Store. Hopefully it gets approved and then they can go back onto their drug plan if it makes more sense.
Yeah, but they're not waiting for a medication that's really important or potentially life-saving for someone. And I think the other thing I'm worried about this year, just seeing how much the drug plan formularies change after the Inflation Reduction Act. I'm concerned that people may find the drug they're running a search on Medicare.gov and they miss that it has a prior authorization or a step therapy. I'm also concerned we haven't experienced whether those exceptions will go through at the same rate as they have before. Will the carriers have new rules in place about this because of how much more of the cost that they're absorbing going forward? And so I imagine that we're going to run into people out there that think that it's just paperwork and then that'll be approved. And we know that when that drug exception comes back and it's not approved, that's always devastating. But even sometimes when it is, like you said, they boot it up into a tier 4 and the copay that maybe you were paying last year is going to be completely different this year. And say what you will, people are still living on a fixed income, and even $2,000 for drugs over the course of the year is a lot. So if you can save the
well,
premiums,
especially if that same medication can be available for $600 for the whole year, if you can source those. Now that's not going to be every single drug, but as you know, there's a pretty good list that we can source for right around that $50 range, the most popular medications. One thing I'll add on to what you just said, I totally agree. I think we're going to see, remember the carriers, the insurers now, for folks who don't work in the world like you and I are living this every single day. The IRA has shifted the cost over to the insurers. So they're having to take on a lot more of that cost. As you know, insurance companies don't necessarily want to pay a claim that they don't have to. So if they can try some other ways, step therapy, and it might be the right thing for the patient, but I think you're right. You're going to see less and less approvals or a little bit more difficulty getting those approved. The other thing that I think a lot of folks haven't thought about is the primary care doctors, who are often going to be the ones that have to help you with applying for some of those waivers to get covered for a drug at a certain level. They're going to be overwhelmed this year as well.
Yeah.
So if everybody knows how busy doctors are and how hard it is just to get an appointment, I think you're going to see delays because of that too, because the physicians are just going to be so overwhelmed with trying to figure out a lot of these changes as well.
Yes, and that's not good because we're also short on physicians that are participating in Medicare these days. And so, it's always a new challenge. Well, that's great information. Let's talk about the next group of people, which might be somebody loves their Medicare Advantage plan. And we know statistically that most people don't change their plan from year to year. That means they get their annual notice of change. Hopefully they're reviewing it and nothing has changed. But one of the things I have always warned our Medicare Advantage clients about is make sure you look at your annual notice of change and open it up and make sure they're not dropping one of your more important medications next year. And of course, this is exactly what we are running into with some of those Medicare Advantage clients. So they have their doctors in the network, their hospitals are in the network, they're all established, and now my plan doesn't cover Eliquis or Januvia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I would tell you that one thing that I like to think that I can kind of see what's going to happen. This was one that I didn't really expect, but I can tell you we're hearing from a lot of individual clients and especially agents who are coming back to us and saying, hey, I'm talking to one of my clients who really loves their plan ABC. All their doctors are in it. Everything's great. It used to cover all their drugs. It still covers it, but now the drug copayment has gone to $150 a month. There's a huge deductible. In order for her to afford that medication, we're going to have to change her MAPD plan, her Medicare Advantage plan. But the problem is the other plans don't accept all of her doctors. So what we're saying to them is, okay, maybe if that plan's working really, really well for the person, they don't have to change their doctors just because of that one drug that's either not covered now or covered at a much higher tier. Remember that Canada or the Canadian Med Store is another one of your tools. Wait a minute. Let's see what the drug would cost if we ordered it from Canada. You know what? We can get our Eliquis for $50 through the Canadian Med Store. My copayment was going to be $47 anyway. Well, why do I have to change my doctors and find new specialists now? I'm really, really happy. I'm going to stay where I am knowing I can do that. So once again, remember, it's not going to be the solution for everything. But when you're running that, instead of thinking, well, now I have to make a decision. Do I want to spend $1,800 a year for my medication? Or do I want to find a whole new set of doctors? Maybe you don't have to do either. Maybe you can stay on that same exact plan, just knowing that you're going to be buying that expensive Eliquis or that expensive Januvia or Janumet through the Canadian Med Store, and that's a way to keep you on that plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is important too, because one of the things I always stress to people if they're coming in and they want a Medicare Advantage plan, it's easy sometimes for us to find a Medicare Advantage plan if you have one or two doctors and one or two medications. But sometimes we have somebody coming in and they have seven doctors and maybe in the beginning they only had a couple, but now over time they've been on their Medicare Advantage plan and they've been continuing to pick new doctors from the network and they're seeing six or seven physicians for different things. Trying to change that Medicare Advantage plan and find another plan that has all of those same providers in the network is somewhat impossible. I mean, my team will make a valiant stab at it, but sometimes we have to go back to the client and say, well, we found a plan that covers the medication, but it only has five of your seven doctors. Are you willing to choose these two? And I don't like changing my doctors. I'm the same as everyone else. I'd rather go to the guy that's been treating me for 20 years. So I do like this solution for folks because it's not realistic that they're necessarily going to leave an Advantage plan and go back to Medicare and then try to get a Medigap plan and then also see if they can find a drug plan where this might just be you can keep the plan that you've always been so comfortable with and you have this new tool where maybe this year you can get some help. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's the biggest thing I think for whether it's clients or agents to know, like, we're here to try to be another tool in your chest. Okay. What happens if I run it this way? I know I can get my Eliquis for $50. And I hate to keep referencing Eliquis, but I think it's one that we hear all the
We
time.
see it all the time.
But yeah, I think that's something to consider. So just know that if you find yourself in that situation, say, okay, let's try this. If we pull the Eliquis out, knowing we can get that from the Canadian Med Store, another tool to help you not only save money, but quite honestly, maybe just stay with the doctors that you've learned to really trust and appreciate, you know what I mean? And not have to make that change, not add to another stressful part of this crazy enrollment season.
Yeah, and you might go through all that and then next year it's something else, right? Now it's another medication. Now you're changing your plan again, and that's always kind of very upsetting. Yeah. There's one last group of people that we talked about. This one is one I can relate to because I have a thyroid condition, but there are people out there who can't tolerate generics. And of course, the one that we run into, we've run into these with several drugs, but by and large, Synthroid, which is a very popular brand name thyroid medication in the US. There are people that can take the generic levothyroxine, and there are people that just swear that it doesn't work as well as the actual Synthroid. And actually, we hear this from providers too, where the provider will tell our client, this is one drug where I want you to take the brand name, not the generic. But what we're finding in these drug plans is that if a generic version comes out, a lot of times they actually will keep that generic on the formulary and they will drop the brand name drug. So if they drop that brand name drug and now the generic is your only option, this is another great way where somebody could come to you and get that one medication.
So yeah, we see that a lot. We see with a lot of brand name drugs. The one that you referenced, Synthroid, is probably the most popular one we see with that. But we see often people that are maybe taking a statin drug that's gone generic. It's available for inexpensive, but for whatever reason, people don't respond as well to the generic. But I can give you an example of Synthroid because that's probably the number one medication. We see that all the time. People saying, my plan will only cover the generic. The generic just doesn't agree with me, but I can't, if I go to fill the brand name, it's going to cost me $100 a month now at the local drugstore. I don't want to pay that much. People can order the brand name Synthroid for right around $40 for a 3-month supply from Canada. So that's an example. Remember, it's not just Synthroid. We're just using that as an example. If for whatever reason, you can't take a generic. And I always encourage people to try generics. They're usually the exact same medication. 90 something percent of people are not going to have any type of a negative side effect, but you will see some people that just don't respond as well to the generic. So they want to order the brand name. And that's another option where Canada can be a great option for folks. Synthroid's an example. Like I said, about $40 for a 3-month supply of Synthroid from Canada, probably about equivalent to what a copayment for the generic would be here in the U.S. One other thing I'll say that, and I just think because we talked about the different people that could utilize us, remember there's a couple others too. There's also those folks who haven't turned 65 yet. We see a lot of times we see that person who's, the spouse is on Medicare, but the husband or wife is still only, hasn't turned 65 yet. So they might be on a high deductible ACA plan, or they may be on a high deductible even employer plan. You don't have to be on Medicare to utilize the Canadian Med Store.
Mhm.
Those folks can also look and say, wait a minute, this is going to cost me an awful lot of money before I finally hit my big deductible. What would it cost me if I order a medication through the Canadian Med Store? And the other one to remember is people that are on Medicare right now, the IRA may benefit them, starting in January. But if you're in that donut hole now still and you're paying a lot of money for your Eliquis or your Januvia or your Janumet or your Advair inhaler, for the next couple of months,
Yeah.
you're still going to be paying an awful lot of money. So remember, you could still order those medications from the Canadian Med Store, because if you're this far into the year, you're probably never going to get into that catastrophic coverage where it's going to make sense for you. So you're going to be paying all that money out of pocket. So
Yeah.
just important to know that it's not just for folks on Medicare. We can help
Good
anybody
point.
who's basically self-paying for their prescription medication. That's the other important thing to know, and we'll go through this a little bit in a minute, but I just want to make sure folks know that we're not an insurance plan. We're not a membership or anything like that. All we are is a network of pharmacies. We're located here in the United States, so we're going to help you, connect you with one of those legitimate pharmacies internationally that can help you get your medications.
Yeah, awesome. And heading in that direction with our conversation, one of the reasons I will share with all of you that we are so impressed with Canadian Med Store is if you've been following Boomer Benefits for a while, or if you're a policyholder, you know that our whole claim to fame is old school customer service. You call our agency, and even though we have more than 100,000 policyholders, you're going to get an actual human being on the line. And I think that's so important today's day and age, and especially for boomers who are aging into Medicare, right? Because they remember the old school customer service. If I can remember it, and I'm Gen X, for sure they do. And that's sort of a dying art, should we say, in America today. And so Bill has offered that he will set us up with a concierge on his team that we can connect you with so that you can call or email with an actual live person. And when I asked my group about, hey, I'm going to have this interview with the Canadian Med Store, what questions do you have? A lot of those questions were all centering around the basics. So can you walk us through kind of from the beginning? Someone has a need for a medication, how do they get the prescription to them? Did the doctor send it? Can you fax it, email it? And then how is it filled? How long does it take to get to them? Just kind of give us the basics on how that works.
Yeah, and I'll try to run through the whole process. If I miss certain things, just ask me
Okay.
specific questions on that. But I can tell you, going back to how we started our company, remember, was we were in Zephyrhills, Florida, which is a small town outside of Tampa, largely senior population, and folks were hearing about going to Canada to fill a medication, but they were in Zephyrhills, literally 20 something hour drive away, and they didn't really trust going online. And so they walked into one of our locations, and we basically helped them through the whole process of saying, well, this would be the price if you ordered it from Canada. We need to get a prescription. We're going to have it mailed directly to you. So that's where we came from. And as we started to see competition, kind of jump up online, and now I think if you go on and Google, Canada drugs or drugs from Canada, you'll probably get like 10,000 or maybe, 100,000 websites. Research shows that probably about 90% of those websites are bogus. They're really just basically out there scamming people. They're either not a legitimate licensed pharmacy. Worse is sometimes they're just looking to capture people's information and steal credit card information and personal data and things like that. So people still want to talk to a real person.
Yes.
And that's what we've built our company around. So if someone comes to us, if they're, referred by Boomer Benefits, they're going to have their own concierge referred over. When I say a concierge, that means somebody on our staff, either a pharmacy tech or one of our customer service people, that's going to help walk that client through the process, explain to them, this is the drug, this is the pharmacy it's coming from, this is the cost of the medication. And then we're going to help that person get a prescription. 99% of the time people are ordering a medication to us, it's not a brand new medication. It's typically a drug that they've already been taking and they're paying too much for here in the US. So we need to get a prescription. So we'll work with their physician to get that prescription over to us. Again, we'll do that. We'll reach out to their doctor, explain to them we're going to be ordering it through our pharmacy, and have the doctor send the prescription directly to us. I would still say the majority of our clients typically go to the physician and get a hard copy of their prescription, either fax it or scan it, or take a picture with their cell phone and send it over to us. And then our pharmacy staff calls the doctor to confirm the prescription.
Okay.
It's important to know that we're not filling any type of controlled substances. So if anybody needs any type of opioids or certain hormone medications, a lot of those type of sleep aids and things like that. They can't be
Yeah.
sourced from an international pharmacy. It's only going to be your typical maintenance drugs that you're
Okay.
taking every single day and are probably going to be taking for the rest of your life. So we basically set that order up, explain to the person, make sure that they're comfortable with where we're going to order the medications. Don't know if we touched on this yet, but we don't only source our medications from Canada. Often we can get a
Yeah.
medication from the UK or from Australia or from New Zealand. The drug might be less expensive. And if somebody wants to order it from that UK location because it's a little bit less than Canada, then they can do that. We place the order, the pharmacy, the international pharmacy packages it up and mails the medication directly to the client. So we're never touching the medication. We're just helping you walk through that process. We then provide you with a tracking number and track the order for you, making sure you know where it is in the process, when you should be receiving it. And then 90 days later, when it's time for you to refill your medication, we're going to reach out to you about 30 days before needing that medication, let you know that it's time to refill, confirm that you still want to refill the medication. Sometimes we have clients that get lucky and their doctor gives them samples or something like that, or something. Yep. So we don't ever want to order a medication without talking to the client. So we'll confirm that with them, whether it's via email or text or phone call, whatever the client chooses. And then we place the medication refill order and it gets mailed directly to you again. We have a lot of people here in Florida, for example. Again, we have clients all over the place, but we have a lot of folks that we call here in Florida snowbirds, people that live in Florida for part of the year and maybe up in the Northeast or Midwest for part of the year. So sometimes, they'll say, hey, I want to refill my medication, but can you hold off for a week because I'm heading back to my, my house in New York or New Jersey or Ohio. So we can set that all up with the individual, and that's how it works. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're always going to review the pricing of the medication and say, hey, listen, this drug is now available through the UK for less expensive than Canada or Australia or something like that, and always give that person the option of where they want to place their order if there's a cost savings to them. I tell you, most of the time people are saving so much money once they become comfortable with the pharmacy that's coming from. They're already pretty darn happy with that, and they're not making a lot of changes. But we'll always let folks know if we find a less expensive option through one of our pharmacy partners.
Yeah, and I remember you also told me that if somebody wanted to order from a specific country, like, I don't know, they research and they hear that New Zealand makes the best drug for this, they can actually tell you that, and you can source that drug, make sure they get it from the country that they want to.
Yeah, really interestingly, cool. The one benefit we have here in the United States, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, is almost every drug is available here. The drug companies make an awful lot of money on selling to the American consumer. Obviously, we all know we're paying more than the rest of the world. So there may be drugs that, for example, won't be available in Canada. Maybe the Canadians said, no, it's too expensive. We're not going to put it onto, or we're only going to allow the older, generic drugs in that category. So that's one reason where we might say, you know what? But we can get it from the UK or we can get it from Australia. We also have some people, like you said, that just feel more comfortable with that. I would think the biggest reason, though, that people often choose one country over another is because sometimes the patent might expire in, for example, the UK prior to it expiring here in the US or in Canada. So sometimes we might see a drug come available as a generic drug, still a approved manufacturer, but the patent has expired. So maybe in the UK, they have a generic that isn't available here in the US yet. That's why somebody might say, man, that's going to save me another $100. Sure. Maybe I'll go over to the UK for that. Or on the opposite spectrum, somebody might go, man, I really like that I can get, a drug for X amount of dollars, but just for $10 more, I can get the exact same brand name that I'm used to getting here in the US. You know what? I don't mind paying an extra $10. I'm already saving so much. I want to stick with the brand name drug. So people always have that option. We're always going to offer that to them and say, these are your options available for your drug. Whatever one you feel most comfortable with, we're happy to help you with that.
Yeah. And I love that customer service and the conversation that you can have with your team, making sure that they go around and figure that out. So if somebody is uncertain, it's easy to ask a question with your team. I know this because I fired a bunch of questions at Corey just the other day, and she got back to me in record time. So that was really impressive. Okay, well, let me finish up here, Bill, with a couple of questions that my group put to me. And I just wanted to throw these at you and find out a little bit about how this might work with you guys. So we talked about the specific manufacturers, but one question is, knowing that medications can be manufactured in Canada, India, New Zealand, how do you ensure the quality of the drugs that your clients might purchase through Canadian MedStore?
So what we do is we have a network of pharmacies. So our pharmacies, whether they're in Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, are actually mom and pop pharmacies, brick and mortar pharmacies. So if you were a Canadian citizen or you were lived in London, England, our pharmacy partners are actual pharmacies that you would walk into one of those countries and go fill your medications for your, for your family. So all of our pharmacies are regulated by their own boards of pharmacy. So for example, what we call our FDA here, the Food and Drug Administration, or our state board of pharmacies. In Canada, they call it Health Canada. In the UK, it's called Royal Medicine. So each different country has their own regulatory body, just like our FDA here in the United States.
Okay.
So those countries fall under their regulatory situation, authority there. The thing that I think really makes folks angry a lot when they hear about how we're paying so much more for prescriptions here than in the rest of the world, it's important to know that about probably a little bit more than 80% of the medications that we're buying here at a pharmacy in the US, meaning if you walk in as a consumer into your local pharmacy, there's about an 80-something% chance that medication was actually manufactured overseas and it's shipped here to us in the US. And as we all know, then the pharmacist counts them into the little brown bottles that we're used to getting, and it's dispensed that way. When it comes to the brand name drugs, the manufacturers are not manufacturing drugs for Canada in Canada and drugs for the UK in the UK and drugs for Australia in Australia. They're probably manufacturing it in one of the main facilities, whether it's here in the United States, whether it's in Cork, Ireland, whether it's in Switzerland or Germany, which are the largest manufacturers of brand name drugs. And then when you get into India, you see the largest manufacturers of generic drugs. The reason I say that is if we're buying a drug from this is where people get very, very angry. If we're buying a drug from Canada that's literally 80% less than what you're buying it for here in the United States, there's a really good chance, and I would say probably 9 out of 10 chance, that the drug was actually manufactured in the exact same facility on the exact same manufacturer. The only difference is one was labeled for sale in Canada and another is labeled for sale here in the US. The difference is we're paying 80% more than the exact same drug from the exact same manufacturer, probably manufactured in the exact same facility, from a Canadian pharmacy or UK pharmacy that we're paying here in the United States.
Yeah, it just goes back to that root cause problem, right? We see various political parties always trying to solve, the legislators trying to solve this problem, but the end result is just that I think these manufacturers, they count on what they're going to get from the US, right? And so they sell it cheaper somewhere else, but then when we try to fix it, the manufacturers are actually fighting that because we're the big cash cow, and it needs some work, right? It needs some work by Congress to turn that around.
It sure does. And, we talk about it all the time, and you know me for a while now. You know me through the National Association, Benefits Insurance Professionals. That's how we met, I think, originally. I am a business person. You know what I mean? I certainly do not, I'm not looking to socialize our medicine system. I tell people all the time. What we have to start asking, though, is why are we as Americans paying so much more for the prescriptions? And basically, the only answer I've really been able, you can make a bunch of arguments about research and development and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm the first to tell you it does take about $1 billion to take a drug from the initial idea to market. My question is, and it's difficult for folks to answer this for me, is I don't disagree that the pharmaceutical companies should be entitled to recoup that. My question is, why are the Americans the only one paying that? Why are we the only country that's taking on that cost? Why are the other first world countries like the UK and England and Australia? Maybe we need to shift some of the costs their way. The difference is, though, they're going in and actually negotiating drug prices and saying, listen, we're going to buy this much and, we want a lower price. And we all know that if you go to 7-Eleven and buy one roll of toilet paper, it costs you a whole heck of a lot more than when you go to Sam's Club and buy the big,
That's
the big
right.
bulk side. So that becomes the big thing that I always tell people. And I say, until that changes, there's no reason that individuals shouldn't be looking for the same exact drug from an international pharmacy and taking advantage of that cost saving that's available there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know this just from my own medication. Sometimes you'll be at the pharmacy and you have a drug that you've been filling for a while. And then one day you go in and the medication just looks different. Well, they've changed the source, right? So it's coming from somewhere else. When I take the drug, it works the same, but it doesn't look the same. And so we know that this happens all the time, even with the own medications we're getting right here in the US.
Right. And often what we have to explain to people too is, there may be a reason from a marketing reason that they want to make a certain drug. We all knew the purple pill back in the day was Nexium, remember before it
Yeah.
went, and then the little blue pill, we all know that one too. So there may be marketing reasons, but often when it comes to generics, they actually make it a different size, shape, color because we want to make sure that regulators, if there's ever a problem with a certain drug, they
Mm,
can immediately identify that drug
I
came
see.
from this manufacturer, and they can do that by looking at it. So it's often important for people to understand that the reason why a drug from one manufacturer may look a little bit different than a drug from another manufacturer, it's because we want to be able to identify where those drugs come from. Remember, when you're getting a drug in a blister pack in the original manufacturer, you know where it came from. Unfortunately, or I don't know if it's unfortunately, but what we're used to here in the United States is getting that brown bottle that's counted from a
Yes.
larger bottle. So that's the way our system is, and that's what people are used to. But I think the psychology of it is, like you just mentioned, if you're used to always getting that little round yellow pill, and now all of a sudden you go in and it's an oval shaped pink pill, well, wait a minute, is this the same medication that I'm
Yeah.
supposed to be getting? And it probably is. I mean, I'd always say confirm that with your pharmacist if you're concerned about it, but it's probably just from a different generic drug manufacturer.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I figured. Okay, a question two is about price matching.
Mhm.
So I know you mentioned if they were a legitimate SIPA approved pharmacy. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so SIPA is actually the Canadian International Pharmacy Association.
Okay.
We're not members of the Canadian International Pharmacy Association because we're located here in the United States, and we're not actually a pharmacy. We're kind of the um, what I would say a client should think about is like their Medicare agent. It doesn't cost you anything to use us, but we're going to help make sure that you're going to work with a legitimate pharmacy.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're willing. If somebody ever comes to us, it doesn't happen often, but if they say, "Hey, Bill, we found this less expensive drug from ABC Pharmacy. I've been ordering from you, but I'll have to order from them because they're less expensive." As long as they're a legitimate pharmacy, they're a member of SIPA, they're a member of Pharmacy Checker is another group that basically oversees the international pharmacies. And if those legitimate pharmacies have a lower price, we're always willing to match that price for somebody. It doesn't happen often. If we find that somebody's offering it for less expensive, we're happy to do it. What we can't do, unfortunately, is like I said, when you go on and search, and sometimes people come back to us and say, "Hey, I found this drug for a lot less expensive than you guys." And we research it. And what we find is that they're not actually even a legitimate licensed pharmacy.
Yeah.
They're saying they're coming from Canada, but they're sourcing a medication from God knows where. Or we can't even find their license. Then we're going to usually tell people, "Listen,
Of
we'd love to
course.
be able to give you a lower price, but this price is we don't even think these guys are real." And most of the time, folks will still order a medication through us. If they don't, at least we feel like we've done the right thing and said to them, "Listen, we can't price match them because they're not licensed." And I like to think that we've helped a lot of people from getting either scammed or getting unsafe medication by providing them
Yeah.
with that information.
Yeah, I'll bet. That's always my big concern too, that they're going to hit a website and there's a really cheap drug because you're actually never going to receive that drug. You're just going to send
Right.
your money into the black void, and that's never fun.
Right.
And I feel like
Right.
some of those really prey upon our seniors.
I don't know how much it means, but I always tell people, "Listen, we've been around for 21 years. We hang our shingle outside our door every single day. People can walk into our offices. We're not hiding behind some website somewhere." And so, like I always say, if there's something that we were doing that wasn't legitimate, I'm pretty confident that, well over 20 years ago, someone would have said, "Hey, we're,
Yeah.
we're going to stop you from doing this." So we feel really, really good, just like you guys do every single day when we go to work. We work hard to do the right thing for our clients. And 21 years later, we're still doing it. So I think hopefully we're doing something right.
Yeah, for sure. I know you also told me about 4 to 6 weeks for your first medication to me. So, you are asking your doctor for some samples, or you're paying for it one time here. So it allow time for it to come from you. But then after that, as you mentioned, you will call them so that you can place your refill orders, which makes everything really easy. And then what about medicines that require cold storage?
Yeah, we can do certain cold medications. A lot of times, insulin, some of the weight loss products that are available now.
Yeah.
What's important to know is that those products often have to be shipped in a specific type of shipping, whether it's expedited shipping, and often they have to be packaged in what they call cold chain packaging. So it has to be in a styrofoam package with
Yes.
the proper ice packs and things like that. one thing that I had to learn, in this world is I thought, well, we'll just throw a bunch of ice in there and keep it cold. Well, what the pharmacist taught me was that not only does it have to stay, it can't go above a certain temperature, but you also can't freeze the medication. So there's a certain way to package those products. So we can ship a lot of those products. But just understand that often there's a little bit more to the process of shipping, and sometimes there may be an additional shipping cost when it comes to something like that. So it's still usually a cost savings, but it takes on that additional cost to the shipping. So yeah, that's what's it. I would say just if you have a question about some of those medications, reach out to us and we can provide you with that. One thing I will tell you, and this is probably the most frustrating part of my day, is we often might hear somebody come to us with a really, really expensive drug, something that's $10,000 type thing.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times we've gone back and said, "Hey, we got great news for you. It's 80% less in Canada. It's going to be $2,000." And unfortunately, what a lot of times clients have to say to us is, you could have told me it was 2 million, because I don't have an extra 10 grand and I don't have an extra 2 grand a month sitting in my pocket either. So we'll always try to find the less expensive drug. In that situation, if we can't help them through Canada, we'll try to steer somebody towards the manufacturer's discount, things like that, where they might be able to qualify financially for those type of programs. Unfortunately, we're seeing less and less of those be easily accessible, unfortunately. I'd like to think that they were going to expand those offerings with a lot of the changes to Medicare and private insurance, but it doesn't look like it's happening. So
yeah, which tells us we have more work to do on affordability of medications here in the U.S.
Yep. Amen.
Well, Bill, this has been so interesting, and I know that our group of followers are going to be very interested to see this interview and potentially work with you. Is there anything I haven't asked you about that you want to mention before we wrap up today?
No, I think what I really want to just tell you is how much I appreciate, you inviting me to have this conversation. Sure. How, I've said it before, but I'll say it publicly now, how much I respect you in the industry, how much I appreciate not only you advocating for your clients, but also for the individual health insurance agents. And it's important to us for folks to know, that you should be working with a health insurance agent. You can do it yourself, but why when you have people out there that can really help you? And I can tell you that our number one referral source is actually our current clients. And then our second and third referral sources are primary care doctors and health insurance agents. Because just like the primary care doctors, you guys are walking through this process every single day. And I think it's important to know when you're talking to an agent or you're talking to someone like Boomer Benefits who's putting this information out there, it's another bit of education for clients. This is another way to do it. Remember, it's not going to solve every problem, but it's another, it's something you can look to as another tool. And if you have other clients out, if you have other friends out there, people that aren't 65 yet, like I said, just remember that we're a resource for you, and hopefully we can help out, some more people if we can do it.
Yeah, and in the world today where the high deductible health plans, sometimes people have a $6,000 deductible on their group health insurance. And if it's a HSA compatible, you could probably save a lot of money just getting some of those meds elsewhere because they're just so expensive here. And you may not even ever hit that deductible. So it's a great point for just all your friends and family that may mention medications that may be expensive. So, well, everyone, we are going to wrap up this video, but if you are not a member of the Medicare Q&A with Boomer Benefits Facebook group, come on and join us. We have conversations and interviews like this all the time in our group, and you can take advantage of the concierge person that Bill has provided to us, and we can connect you with a Canadian Med Store representative so that you can ask all the questions that you have that maybe we didn't cover in today's video. And like you said, have another tool in the tool chest. So I know how busy you are this time of year, Bill. I'll celebrate with you at the next NABIP meeting sometime after December 7th. But until then, appreciate you so much. Thanks for being here.